Hey everybody. Fortunately, this is not a live shot. We're still waiting for the live NASA stream to come up for the rollout tonight. The rollout is still scheduled for about an hour from now, but I thought because this is going to be a nighttime rollout, we're probably not going to get to see too much in the middle of it. So there'll probably be floodlights around the vehicle assembly building, and once the vehicle gets past that, as it heads out towards the split in the crawlerway between Pad A and Pad B for Launch Complex 39, it'll go into the darkness. And the plan for me, assuming I can get up early enough tomorrow morning, is to get up ahead of sunrise on the East Coast and cover either the final bit of the roll to the pad and getting hard down on the pedestals out there, or just, we'll just basically do another Q&A session tomorrow morning. And hopefully this will be, it may be a little bit more photogenic in the sun out of the pad tomorrow morning. Again, assuming that first motion, assuming we get the start of the rollout here in the next 90 minutes or so. And I'm kind of taking a peek over at the NSF NASA space flight, their live stream, to see if we can see anything, and also trying to, I'm peeking at the NASA, live stream over here. So if anybody sees that, so right now, they may go live a little early. Again, maybe they have some operational, they can see and hear things that we can't necessarily hear. So these are a couple of shots that NASA posted. These were taken on Tuesday, St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. And I think at the time you could see they still had the it's a little hard to see because of this bridge that goes across High Bay 3 here, but they still had this platform. They still had the platform F extended. That was where they did the last work. They finished the flight termination system end-to-end testing sooner than they had planned. So we got this back and forth between we're estimating we're gonna roll out on Friday, and then they came back to Thursday because they had another cable. So I think they'd mentioned back around New Year's that when they were getting ready to do this the first time, heading into the mid-January rollout, there was a cable, a flight termination system cable that was not, either wasn't checking out or whatever. Something similar, but we don't know how close exactly or it was, but they decided to remove and replace the cable, which meant they had to retest it. And so when they looked at how much work was necessary and how much retesting was necessary, that first estimate put them back, pushed them to tomorrow night, or maybe tomorrow. But then when they did the work, they were able to get it done, maybe one, maybe two shifts, maybe three shifts early. And so now they're planning to roll out, hopefully in the next hour or so. And I'll just kind of continue to peek over there. But we will see. One of the things that had been discussed a little bit is they did have some weather roll through the Space Center midday today, and it does sound like it's still a little windy there. But again, assuming that this criteria is, they were talking about, I think, weather winds over 18 knots, but assuming that this rule here with the sustained winds of 40 or peaks above 45 knots, would exceed their criteria for rolling. But it doesn't sound like they're there. But again, this will be, we don't have the exact number of we don't have the numbers in front of us to look at. There was a day when they used to have a couple of TV feeds that were somewhat readily available, and you could see they would loop through the weather. There was a weather feed, and they would loop through the weather data page pages. You get wins from the different locations around the Space Center, et cetera, et cetera. So now we're just waiting to, we'll just wait and see. I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard anything to suggest that that we haven't heard that they're delayed from first motion, but I think probably because the weather is not quite as nice as it was the first time they did this back in mid-January. They're not necessarily going to they're not going to try and roll out early. So, but early being this would only be an hour early, so it's probably not going to mean it's really going to be more about how long it takes them once they get going and get out to the pad. But the other the other thing that they did yesterday, because we heard the first motion was reported around 8 p.m. Eastern, which is again a little bit less than an hour from now. But NASA, and so we got some messaging from NASA about that time, but then when they announced it in the blog post, they waited until the crew officially went into quarantine last night. So, which they went into quarantine essentially at L-14 days, maybe not quite to the hour, but pretty close. And so, so they waited until they could, they could officially say the crew had gone back into quarantine. So, so this is kind of where we are, and you'll see me glance over here. And so, what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to just we can just do questions and watch. Hopefully, the stream will come up maybe a little bit before the top of the next hour for those of you who are familiar with clock faces. And then I'll probably go up until around 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and then I have to take a break to help out with my dog's dinner here in the Pacific time zone, and then we have to go out and see if he's willing to do any business we have pretty hot weather here especially for March. But then I'll be going over to the NSF NASA spaceflight live stream after that little break, and then tomorrow morning I'll probably adjust the start time a little bit, but somewhere around I'll have to go take a look and see but it's somewhere around, if I recall correctly, sunrise is approximately 7:30 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, and so I'll probably plan on going live. I think I probably scheduled it for around 7. We would probably have some twilight to look at, but that's kind of the looking forward here. I'll stay over here on my channel until around 5:30. Well, this is my local time, so 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and then I'll be over on the NSF live stream after that. Again, assuming that the rollout is still, it certainly could be a few minutes late or several minutes late. But Teddy won't wait, so Teddy will be having dinner at 5:30 Eastern, or 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. So, but that's kind of the plan. Is I'll go here for about an hour and a half, then go over to the NSF NASA spaceflight live stream until they sign off, and then I'll come back in the morning, and hopefully we will see the vehicle either nearing the pad or on the pad by that time. So. But in the meantime, we can do questions, and I'll just keep an eye on what's going on. I have the NASA stream kind of in the background, so to speak, here, so I can sort of see it on my screen. But if anybody sees them go live or gets the notification, go ahead and let me know, and I'll leave this picture up, this picture from Tuesday up. This would have been taken from VAB High Bay 4 and looking to the east across to the High Bay 3 integration cell. So we may get something like that in the NASA live feed. It depends on what cameras they have. Of course, they have lots of operational cameras in the VAB on the roof, so they have lots of. Hopefully, we will get some good angles here as the vehicle to be able to tell how far into the rollout they've gotten once they go live. So, we'll see. So anyway, so somebody's mentioning here. So I would say right now, Artemis 2 is scheduled. So the first window, I can switch over there. So this is the next launch period. And so I mean, again, considering what's happened this year so far, we've gone from launch period 17 to 18 to now 19, February, March, April. So yes, this opportunity here at the beginning. So launch period 19 is only the first, the beginning of the month here. Again, this is there's a little bit of funny business going on here where April 30th is actually the first opportunity in launch period 20, but they won't, again, because the message is no later than April. They don't want to talk about May. There is no May until and unless that becomes necessary. So anyway, so yes, they might be launching. Well, their next launch opportunity for Artemis II is likely to be before the next launch opportunity for Starship and their first version 3 flight. But it's not over till it's over. It's like Artemis 2 doesn't start until liftoff, and so we can go all the way up until a few moments before SRB ignition, but the mission does not start until the boosters start. So we have to wait. This is becoming, maybe already was not becoming an exercise in don't count your chickens before they're hatched. But yes, it's right now. This opportunity at the beginning of April would be before the at least what we're hearing is the first opportunities for the first Starship version 3 launch. So the question, let me actually, I can probably bring they had a close up, somewhat closer. Actually, I can probably zoom in on this a little bit, although this is not the full res, but why not, since we have time here. So these are different foam applications, basically. So you have, so the foam was sprayed on, I think, all of the core stage elements individually, and then when they bolt them together, you see basically the seams are then sprayed with foam after they're bolted together. So it makes sense. You can't do that before you bolt those flanges together. So what we can see here in this picture is we can see this is the inner tank, the barrel of the liquid oxygen tank, and so the aft dome actually sits inside the inner tank, and then the forward dome sits inside. This is the forward skirt, and then you have the launch vehicle stage adapter, and they all get separate applications of foam, and so you can see these lines. So this is the liquid oxygen tank to inner tank flange. There's a flange between the inner tank to the liquid hydrogen tank, and that one actually gets stressed probably a little bit more because of its liquid hydrogen, and so the vehicle shrinks a little bit when it's loaded with the cryogenic propellants. And so this is the bolted flange between the forward skirt and the liquid oxygen tank. And then the launch vehicle stage adapter, you can actually see this was all done manual spray, and you can see the difference a little bit in the more uniform appearance of, again, this is the acreage of the liquid oxygen tank. That's done robotically. It's an automated spray. They rotate the tank on essentially on a spit, and they have spray guns that are applying the foam at this is essentially a spray schedule. You rotate the tank at a particular speed. You're applying the foam at a particular rate, feeding it, and so the launch vehicle stage adapter, they do these strips, these longitudinal vertical strips, and then there are these little lines where they tie together the foam, and then you can see some areas where one of the other things that you're seeing here is that they do have to sand the foam down in areas where it's not quite, you have an outer mold line of the vehicle and you have some tolerances about, it can be, whatever, some millimeters. It needs to be this thick, plus or minus some number of millimeters, perhaps. Again, they may be using English units here, but they will sand down areas of, especially these manual sprays. All of these flange closeout sprays are all done manually, and then you can see sort of that rumpled appearance here. You can see where areas where they would probably, where some of them, the lighter areas would be where they would have sanded down the exterior, and it's got kind of a like an orange peel, the rind of an orange. It has that kind of texture on the surface. And so again, you can sort of see up here in these areas here, you can see some of the spots that are a little lighter where they've sanded away a little bit of the top of the, the rind, and then that exposes, hasn't been exposed to ultraviolet light as much, and that's what causes it to tan, so to speak. So, I think the foam has enough. I think if you were to do a cross section of the foam, you would see bubbles in it essentially. So it's essentially, there's a lot of it is air, so it does have some ability to expand and contract with the substrate, with the tank structure itself. So, actually, and I should go. Let me. I'm not expecting the rollout to be this early, just because I would have thought if they wanted to take advantage of, they would have gone earlier. But let me go I wanted to take a quick peek at the. They're still sticking with five. I'll apologize. I'm going to keep mixing Pacific and Eastern time because I'm in the Pacific time zone right now. So this was, if there had been an opportunity to do some interviews, for instance, I would have considered going out to the rollout to this rollout too. But this is really going to be more of a photo opportunity. I don't know how many, if there will be any opportunities to talk to anybody. We'll just have to see. Oops, did it the wrong, it went backwards. I'll go back to the little bit of the wider shot. Okay, I can do it this way. So, I think I guess we would have to go back and look at the. It does look like the launch vehicle stage adapter got a little bit more of a tan, so it does look like it has a little bit more of a maybe not uniform, but the tan lines, so to speak, are a little bit more uniform. I think we saw this with the Artemis I vehicle, where when that vehicle rolled out to the pad for the first time, almost 4 years to the day. So that was March 17th. That was St. Patrick's Day in 2022. Same thing. You had the launch vehicle stage adapter had not been outside as much as that core stage had been. That core stage had been outside for over a year at Stennis Space Center. Not completely exposed, but the top of it for sure. It was not an indoor test stand there. So anyway, we're seeing a similar thing, but and of course the core stage also is getting more of a tan. The 6 weeks approximate, well, not 6 weeks, it was only about a month, but still that's probably the most time it had spent outside itself, because it did not go through that extended test campaign that the first flight unit did. So the question about the we did see Bloomberg released a story. Unfortunately, I I do not have they have a paywall. I mean, again, I cannot speak too ill of paywall since I have one of my own here on the channel myself, but I do not have a subscription to Bloomberg. And so, but those of you who are interested, there is a Bloomberg story about, the possibility of changing the concept of operations for the lunar landing. These made either the first or second lunar landing mission with Starship, to have Starship take Orion to the moon versus Orion finding Starship and docking with it in lunar orbit. And so the question here is, if would I say when SLS goes, meaning when it's retired, does Orion go as well? I think we certainly have a much stronger idea now that there's some consensus about, again, maybe this will change, but because it was it was not, I don't know, I don't think that what the Senate authorization draft bill, which has not even been passed by the full body yet, it's a little subtle, the fact that this was a big political win, but it wasn't like they conceded or anything like that, like conceding an election or something. But that was a big change for them, but it was fairly subtle. So, and because of that, who knows if we're going to see any back and forth here, but it's a big first step for what the Trump White House has been trying to cancel SLS for a while. And I think they chose a long time ago, so back in the first administration, to go after the upgrades first. And that basically shortens, there's no long-term future for SLS if you take the upgrades off the table. We're still trying to find out about the solid rocket booster upgrade, but I think, again, to me, the fact that nobody wants to talk about it is not a good sign for that. Same thing with the gateway, which is something that I've been emphasizing. But anyway, at least the way it looks right now, it seems like Congress is at least okay with what the way I was doing, again, using a U.S. sports analogy, football analogy, is that this would be like a bridge system to whatever commercial lunar transport system is going to be used, whether it's the obvious contenders between SpaceX Starship or Blue Origin's Blue Moon system. But Orion and Orion's prime contractor is Lockheed Martin, and they've talked for a year, well, maybe not quite a year, but I'm not sure if they would call it pivoting, but they began publicly talking about looking at a commercial version of Orion in that Artemis II timeframe. I think they probably waited until after the big, beautiful bill was passed, and that was mid-year, July 4th. So it's possible, if Lockheed Martin thinks that they can make it a competitive offering, that there could be a different type of a transition. I think for SLS, we don't see them talking about commercializing it anymore. And so that would probably be a transition and retirement. And so then the question becomes, is Orion a transition to, Lockheed Martin and whatever, they have, like, the European service module, the prime contractor is Airbus. Would that group of primes and subcontractors be willing to take the, either most, some, or all of the financial burden for operating that program off of the government's hands? I think, and then having that be a competitive product. I think that's, we will have to see if they're still exploring that. And there would still be a transition period there, I think, where the government would have to continue to support the program in that transition period. And how many years is that? Is that a year, 2 years, more than that? And I think the other thing, obviously, is when is it realistic for there to be a commercial system? Again, setting aside Orion because it'll be kind of a hybrid, but when will a wholly, fully commercial system, completely designed and developed outside of government, be ready to do what this system? And again, to be fair, this system is we're waiting to do the crude demo for this system. That's what Artemis II is. But when would that system or providers for that demonstrate what this mission is going to demonstrate, which is launching a crew to the moon and then bringing them back and landing them safely on Earth? And so what we'd thought before at the end of last year was that that Congress wanted to protect against there being a gap in the capabilities. But I think now, if they really are willing to make SLS essentially just a bridge system from where we are right now with this, where we have several government managed and owned and operated systems, to a model, a fully private model where the government is just renting Starship to, the astronauts take it as a rental down to the surface and back, or they take it all the way from the ground to the moon and back. But it's a SpaceX. SpaceX owns the vehicle, and so we'll just have to see. So I think there is at least a possibility. It might be more than just a possibility. It might be a strong possibility, but they have not talked about it too much, and we just had this change in plans, 3 weeks ago, give or take. So I think it's to be. We need to hear from Lockheed Martin for sure, and maybe some of the Orion program officials about what they're talking about. And to be fair, we're still waiting for sort of more official words about what the White House and Congress, what their plan is for SLS, and they would need to confirm in some way that they see this now in a different way, as opposed to it being something that has a future, a long-term future. So I guess I would say beyond into the next decade, or whether they're looking at Artemis V now as an end point, as a retirement point. So that's, we will have to see. We'll have to see what they want to do. But the fact that they were willing to suspend, and again, it sounds like they're going to close out Exploration Upper Stage and Mobile Launcher 2. Again, they will need to confirm that, or in some way, shape, or form. But if they're willing to do that, then they're willing to go in a different direction, as they say. And so that we don't know when that's going to be. Similarly to Exploration Upper Stage and the SLS Block 1B configuration and Mobile Launcher 2, we really didn't know. We did not have a good idea about when they were going to be ready to fly, and it didn't look like they were going to be ready to fly much sooner than the end of 2028. And even there, I think that we don't have enough information to say any more definitively. That we just have not got enough detailed information to know where their schedule is. But again, to be fair, all around, we don't know when the commercial providers and their lunar systems are going to be available. We have these aspirational goals and these missions that they've now laid out, with Artemis III mid-2027, Artemis IV beginning of 2028, and Artemis V end of 2028. But we really have very little data about where the lunar lander providers are and their path to get to those three flights. Whether one of them does all three of them, or whether they participate in the Artemis 3 test and then they trade off lunar landings. We don't know where they are in terms of development. And the thing is, I think what we've seen over the last 2+ years, if not going all the way back to the beginning of the Starship flight tests, that it's almost 3 years ago now. It's hard to tell how much progress a given flight test, even ones that are completely successful, it's hard to tell where that leaves them, because we've not heard after a flight test what looking 2, 3, 4 flights ahead in the schedule, even though all of these folks have 6-month, 12-month, 20 more. They have plans that go out several quarters, if not several years, and then those are adjusted regularly. We just don't know what those are, and so it's hard to tell how realistic. You could say the same thing about EUS and Block 1B that you can say about, you could even say with the Chinese. We don't know how realistic their schedules are for their launch dates and their targeted lunar landing missions as well. So that's kind of where we are right now. Is I think that the one thing that this does show, though, is that it does show that Congress is receptive to moving on from this system, because of all of the delays that it's had over the last at least 10 years. And so, I mean, I was talking about this in the members live stream a couple of days ago. A decade ago, the SLS was considered to be more of a workhorse for, it wasn't called Artemis at the time, but they were projecting by this time, maybe 2027, but I mean, in this time frame, that they would be launching 2 SLS vehicles a year to the moon. They would be launching one crew configuration like we see here with the Orion on top, and then they'd be launching one cargo SLS every year. Now this is about when they would be starting that, but still, if you compare that aspiration to what's happened, I think that Congress, you can setting aside the blame pie, if you want to call it that, about who's to blame for all of that, and everybody who was involved can probably has different different slice of that, or different how big of a slice we can argue about that, but I think Congress is ready. This at least is a strong signal that they're ready to try something else, basically. And again, we'll see, because it's not like nobody actually said anything sort of in a explicit way that we're done. Nobody said that, but that again, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. It is a big deal because it's the first step towards retirement for SLS for sure. So, but again, doesn't mean that they can't. We've seen 180s before, but I just again does not. We don't have any indications of that either. Right now, we just have this beginning of a consensus about where to go with this, really more looking ahead to the next decade. So. Sorry, looking at another chat. That's an interesting bot. Yeah, and so I mean, Steven's talking about this. They put language in, talking about, or you'd like the administrator to come out and say there will not be a gap. I mean, I don't know that he would be. I think he would probably be willing to do that. That's just my opinion. Again, maybe not, but I think he has, he's thinking big, and he's thinking about doing, especially just again for the rest of this, because that's as long as his term as administrator is as well. So he's thinking about doing a lot with this system. This system would be a big part of it, but it's really it is still up to Congress to a great degree, because Congress has more sustainability is not the right word, but there's more continuity, pardon me, in congressional leadership than there is in the White House. And we tend to see, I guess, probably not fair, but we've seen a lot of sort of, well, actually we've seen it with Congress too, but then you have seniorities between majority and minority parties. But we've seen kind of a bipolar behavior of going back and forth between one side or the other. It's like one, and I almost consider that to be kind of 180s. But space policy is not aligned along political parties necessarily, or it's not aligned the same way as the political parties are aligned. But anyway, the point is that the big thing here wasn't that Mr. Isaacman proposed this change as much as, I mean, that is big, but even bigger is the fact that Congress endorsed it. Again, whether you want to say that's subtle or not, I think, to me, we've had presidential administrations propose just in this 15 years approximately big changes, and Congress has agreed to a few of them, but not many, and they've rejected more than they had. In fact, they rejected this plan a year ago, so less than a year ago. So to me, it's I would say that the fact that Congress is going along with the White House plan now is more significant. It doesn't mean that the what Mr. Isaacman is proposing isn't significant. It's just, I think, seeing Congress make that change is, even if you could see breadcrumbs, and again, I called it a permission structure a couple of videos back. So it's not like this was completely out of the blue. It's just, to me is a bigger deal, but it also means now that the White House can at least take the next few steps in their plan, and we will see. But I mean, again, the reason that I keep bringing up the solid rocket booster upgrade, the Bolé, and the Gateway program is because those, once you confirm that you're not going to do the solid rocket booster upgrade, again, you're setting a low ceiling for SLS of no more than 8 launches. And then for Gateway, again, this architecture has been for a long time based on that cislunar staging orbit. And so once you take those out, you're basically re-architecting the system around commercially developed architectures. And so you are optimizing. And I mean, again, to be fair, there are people who've been arguing to do that for probably certainly this whole decade, if not longer. So what's happening now, I think, is that we're seeing Congress is at least signaling that they're willing to start moving strongly in that direction now. So I think that the at least what well, I'd heard a rumor about this a few months ago. It's not that old, but it's a while ago. And I think Eric Berger had reported on this, maybe somewhat in passing. I don't know that he based an entire story around it a little while ago. But my understanding, and I have not read the Bloomberg article in total, but we've seen some social media posts, and again, I'd heard about this concept, and it had to do with the way I'd heard it framed was that it had to do with the acceleration proposals from SpaceX and Blue Origin. Now, this would be specific to the SpaceX acceleration option, but the idea would be that Orion would dock with Starship in Earth orbit, and then Starship would take that mated vehicle down to low lunar orbit, and then Orion would stay there and loiter. And this would be basically, from the Orion standpoint, very similar to the constellation concept of operations. So in that case, they had a large lunar lander and then an even larger Earth departure stage. And the Earth departure stage would do the TLI burn, and then the lunar lander would do the lunar orbit insertion burn. Take the lunar lander and Orion down to low lunar orbit. Then you do the surface sortie where the lander goes down to the surface and then comes back up. The crew gets back in Orion, and then Orion, really the only major burn that Orion does is that trans-Earth injection burn from low lunar orbit. So now my understanding of the concept of operations here is that Starship would do all of those burns to get down to the low lunar orbit. And then again, from Orion's standpoint, it's going to loiter in low lunar orbit while you're doing however long the surface cruise on the surface. And then Starship would come back up, the crew would transfer back to Orion, and then Orion would do that single large burn that it does. It has roughly a kilometer per second of delta V, and that's enough to do one way, either into low lunar orbit or out, but not both. And so that in theory would work. It's, again, as usual, we're missing details. And again, the devil, and either the angel or the devil, is in the details, as always. But I think one of the takeaways I had from reading this report, since it's sort of, again, we're seeing confirmation come from the media in leaked information, as opposed to coming from either NASA or SpaceX or again, I guess what you would call an official source. But again, my takeaways from seeing somewhat of a confirmation of this is what is being accelerated here. So why is this, again, the rumors were that this would help Starship because it would not have to do it wouldn't require as many tanker refuelings, because in the old plan, Starship would have to go to the gateway orbit and then loiter there for 60 to 90 days. So now, if you take all you can optimize this, you take all of the loiter period out, and so that maybe Starship isn't able to loiter in anywhere for 90 days for a while. So maybe that's part of the acceleration. And then again, you don't need as many tankers, because you're going to load the Starship up, and then immediately, so as soon as Starship is fully fueled in orbit, you launch Orion to dock to it, and then they go straight to the moon. So rather than loitering full for 2 months, you might loiter for a couple of days tops. So that would be the way I would understand it. But I mean, again, we don't, I think that's, to me, one of the questions that was not really, that I have not heard them talk about necessarily, at least reading the initial social media posts, was how is this an acceleration for Starship over what they were going to do? Because the system, when they get to the full systems for, I think, both of the providers, they should both be able to handle long loiters with their cryogenic fuel management systems. Again, at least their concepts would support that without too much difficulty. But again, of course, the devil is in the details as well. So, but I think that was, I'm trying to see, I think, what was the other? Yeah, I think those were sort of the questions, was how does this shorten the development time for Starship to be ready to fly now Artemis 4? And then So how many, is it because of the loiter? It reduces the loiter time, and because the thing is, when you're loitering in around the moon, you have no way of refueling that's again, you talk about extending supply chains. They're not initially going to have the ability to refuel Starship in lunar orbit. So is that part of it? And then the other part of that being that, so you only need to do so many tankers to fill it up. You don't have to stop in the gateway orbit. You just go straight to low lunar orbit. It's probably you can do more of a direct transit. So that I did not hear laid out necessarily in the social media reports about the story today. So, we hopefully we'll get something official at some point. Hopefully soon. So, just kind of scrolling through here, and I need to keep okay. It looks like the NSF folks are now sort of deployed out on the crawler way, but it doesn't look like. Well, let me take a quick look to see. I do need to keep an eye. But definitely interesting story today for sure. And again, I think this is going to be an interesting dynamic, especially if the budget's released, not next week, but the week after, which will be the week of possibly the first launch attempt for this. It would be interesting if we got more details about the future of these systems, at least what the plans are from the administration. And then, of course, we will have to wait some number of weeks until we hear from Congress about what their position is on all of this. Let's see, the strakes. Okay, since I see that question, the strakes are. Let me see if I can find a picture of that. I mean, I know I had. These were actually in. Trying to think again what the. Let me see if I can find that note. But they're basically they sort of straddle the solid rocket booster to core stage forward attach points. So I just want to give. Oh, okay. So right, it was. And I apologize, sir. I should. It's been a busy time, but Scott Manley had some images of them, close-up images of them in one of his videos, and this would have been back, I think, in the September timeframe, and so they would be like, it's hard to let me see if we can kind of see them in the close up. Maybe this is you can kind of see them here. So there's two on each side of and I'll go pull up but you can just barely see them. They're light colored, and they run longitudinally up, vertically, but there you can see one on each side here, and then there are ones on the other side on the other side of the forward attach points. But there's but I mean, these images were taken by NASA. It's just again, I asked NASA for the basically the originals, but they did not. They weren't willing to They're like, well, we don't feel like releasing them, but yeah, these are close-ups, and so these are this is from the vantage point of the mobile launcher looking at the vehicle, and so then the other, again, the view that we had from the wide shot, this would be the other way. So in this case, this is the left booster, right booster. This is, again, if you don't hear it, the terminology very often, but this black band is called the wedding band, I believe. And it's like, if you don't, it's from shuttle days, and it's like, we only hear them like once every 3 years or so. But anyway, but these are the strakes themselves. But you can see you can see these are the forward attach points between the boosters and the core stage. And the core stage actually, the booster attach points actually sit underneath. So the core stage and all of the weight from Orion, from the launch abort system, actually sits on the boosters, and then at liftoff, the boosters pick the whole vehicle up. There's a thrust beam that runs through the core stage, and it picks that beam up basically. So, and then again, so now we're looking on the other side, but again, you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 on each side, and then let me see if I can find the. And I'm trying to keep an eye on the live stream. Okay, we're getting close. They did provide a visualization around that same September time frame about the flow. So let's see if... No. I don't know if I'm going to be able to... Oh, I can do it like this, or I can try and do it like this. Let me see if I can open it with... Yeah, okay. So, well, you can kind of tell. Again, so the flow's running. So top without strakes, the top views without strakes, and then the bottom is with them. So that gives you a little bit of a, it's just a flow visualization, but you have less turbulence. And so what they were seeing was, and I'll have to see if I can bring that up. I'll go back to the live stream while I'm finding that, even if it's not live yet. But they'd started to see some, they knew they were going to see some vortices in the sort of the transonic region. So, as the vehicle is reaching Mach 1, as it approaches that, they were getting these issues with this was a vortex issue. And so what they saw on Artemis 1 was they saw higher vibration levels measured between the, not between, but they saw the vibrations in the structure, and they saw the vibrations with for instance, the avionics boxes. They're measuring, those sit on shelves. They're measuring the, accelerations basically, and they saw higher values than they expected to see, but they'd already started to see. So this is a, and I'm not highlighting it very well, but this was the configuration of the Block 1 vehicle that would have flown Europa Clipper. So obviously we're looking at a typical payload fairing on top here, but they did some of this wind tunnel testing in the 2019 timeframe, which was somewhat offset from when they'd done some previous wind tunnel testing. And so they started to see this as they were using, I guess, more higher fidelity models in the wind tunnel. So they'd started to see some of this in wind tunnel before the first flight, but then they saw more of it with the in-flight data as well. So. So that's interesting. I have not. So Stephen's talking about the head of the European Space Agency. I've not had a chance to hear his remarks. But I think, again, if I think we're seeing some of this, we're seeing similar dynamics to where right now the United States is kind of going its own, and so I will not be surprised if we see, for Gateway, we see kind of a take it or leave it, because I think even if you go back and listen to Senator Cruz and his questioning of Mr. Isaacman last year in those nomination hearings, at least my interpretation of his questions was more Gateway was important to him, and you can even say that it still is important to him and his constituents. He represents the state of Texas. Johnson Space Center is the home center for the program, but the race, the lunar landing race, was more important. And he did say that the law doesn't specify only an orbiting platform. It specifies, I think it said, and I have to go back and listen or see his actual question, but he talked about, I think, either an orbiting platform or a lunar base or something to the words of that effect. And again, I mean, I think Mr. Isaac was one of the things Mr. Isaacman was much clearer about in his testimony last year was, I don't think he ever, he said he would follow the law, but I don't think he ever mentioned it, kind of like what we're seeing now, never really talked about Gateway. And again, there are a lot of people who don't like the concept of Gateway and would rather, again, this is just, again, I'm probably mixing metaphors, but I think a lot of people would rather that the crews just rendezvous on the surface as opposed to rendezvousing in a staging orbit. So I think that's they are looking to do that. They want to get into surface operations and start working on in situ resource utilization, that kind of thing. So the initial elements are going to be launched on Falcon Heavy. Now, Falcon Heavy can only take it up to a sort of it's in the geosynchronous transfer orbit or geostationary transfer orbit. It's in the GTO type of energy, and then the Gateway power and propulsion element would spiral out from Earth orbit to the moon. But the other elements could be launched by commercial providers. They would just have to be reintegrated with some kind of a tug to take them there. And so even though we have providers that are talking about tugs, there isn't necessarily anything that can take like a 10 metric ton class that can be utilized today. But there are, I'm sure, again, I think we'll see if there really is I think again, the writing isn't necessarily on the wall for Gateway, but again, this is just very odd. It's very odd for them to be unable to talk about it at all, to be unable to say the word Gateway. is suggestive that they have other plans. But we'll see, because there is something the European Space Agency is providing the lunar IHAB, or the lunar HAB, I guess it's called now, and then the lunar view modules, and then I think UAE was going to provide the airlock. So, but again, this would not be the first time that the U.S. changed their mind and sort of left international partners having to decide whether to take it or leave it. So we'll see. Okay, so they still haven't. So we'll see whether we get. We're just past 8 p.m. Eastern. I see the streams. We're basically waiting for the NASA stream to start. So, um, I think I would prefer that they would just go ahead and give us the view of the. But maybe they're not ready to roll just yet. But I'll basically try and continue here for something short of the next half hour. Boy. Yeah, there are lots of concepts. I think, again, I'm partial to concepts that people are actually trying to realize. So, I mean, to me, Starship is more favorable to me than Sea Dragon, if nobody's trying to actually realize Sea Dragon. At least SpaceX is trying to fly Starship and make it work. So, but we'll see. So it sounds like first motion may have been delayed about 15 minutes. So, but I mean, that's pretty much what we're doing anyway. We're gonna have to. Okay, I mean, it has been windy all day. Although I think they had weather earlier, so we'll see. Um, we'll see whether 15 minutes is enough. Then I'll just, like I said, I'll go till about, still just sort of just short of 30 minutes past the hour here. I can take questions. Until then, I can put up the. I'll go ahead and put the picture of the vehicle. This is the old still from a couple of days ago. Or it was. Oh, there we go. Maybe. There we go. So yeah, this is not live. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I'm not expecting. Well, I'm hoping actually to talk to um, somebody, the one of the representatives from Lockheed Martin, um, in a sometime in the next couple of weeks, pre-launch, about what they're thinking for but they've done interviews, so they've talked to other reporters and talked about a few of these things that they're thinking about. I think they're thinking about it in terms of a lunar. It's a lunar, a crewed lunar transport. This is the vehicle that they have right now, and then maybe, again, doing upgrades on it to give it more, perhaps more delta V performance, so that you might be able to do a little bit more support, have support for a little bit more either loiter time in low lunar orbit, or maybe give it the ability to get to other types of staging orbits around the moon. And we'll just have to see. We'll have to see what other types of transportation architectures are offered. Um, but I don't think they're talking about using it for low Earth orbit applications. I think you're going to be looking at something like, certainly Dragon. I think something that can be launched multiple times a year. I don't know how long it's going to take Orion to get to that point, or whether it can get there. If they can get it to a couple times a year with reuse, then I'd say still, if anything, it's going to be something that's it would be more competitive in the lunar or cislunar space, I think, than in the low Earth orbit space, where again I think a spacecraft like Dragon could probably fly more frequently than it's doing for space station. It's just that they don't want to be flying. They wanted to optimize for science and not have a high amount of visiting vehicle traffic to the station, because every time something comes in, you have to stop what you're doing and monitor that traffic as it comes in. So So Dave says that they've got 25 knot steady state. So is that not acceptable? Because I know we'd seen them state, we've seen them state. I think that this was the basic criteria. But I think when it says do not roll if the forecast is greater than 40 knots. Well, I don't know if that's which bound that is. Is that max, or is it, is that something else? So okay, so I guess it's possible then. No, I mean, I'm again, I'm stealing a peek at the NSF NASA spaceflight feed, and the water trucks are at least spraying the crawler way down. So yes, tonight I am in California. Tonight is really more for people who are there at the Kennedy Space Center in person. This is much more of a pure photo opportunity, as opposed to an opportunity to gather, to talk to people, talk to principals, and ask them questions. And so, it's not quite the opportunity that the first rollout was. There was more of a chance of interviewing people, and we had a news conference the day before. The crew, I don't know, I would imagine the crew's, actually I'm not so sure if the crew's there this time. It'll be kind of interesting. They can probably go, but they probably can't. They were able to see a lot of people on rollout day, and I think that the quarantine protocols probably would restrict how many people they can see. But they may be there. It's just that I don't know that they're necessarily going to be working the crowds necessarily. So right. So I guess that means they need to update this basic criteria because it's whatever is. So again, if the crew access arm has a limit, then these wins might be referring to one part of the roll. But if you can't get out the door, if you can't cross the threshold and go outside, then you never get there. So I guess we'll just have to we're just going to stand by. Although again, for the next 20 minutes or so. So right, the crew's in quarantine, but they, if I recall correctly, they visited. No, maybe I'm probably mixing. I'm probably conflating different wet dress rehearsals. But again, like I said, I would not be surprised if they're using distancing protocols, social distancing, those types of things. People around them are going to social distance, but it's it's possible it's possible that they could be there to view the rollout. It's just that they would have to stay somewhat away from larger crowds. But they're the people, as long as the people around them are practicing the protocols so that they don't get the crew sick. It's possible that I just don't know. And again, maybe they may not, they may not be doing it this time. They would be, so if we're essentially 13 days before the first launch attempt, they I think they were talking about flying down there somewhere around L-5. So they'll be down there in not too long from now. Right, but then of course again, so folks are here talking about the NSF NASA space flight, the dedicated live stream, but then of course they have their Space Coast Live. So that I'm cheating in it, and of course Spaceflight Now also has a live stream. I don't know whether they have, um, if they have something. Um, well, I think Dave's talking about the plywood sheets that they put down before the crawler gets to the crawler way, but I mean I feel like there are images. I don't know that I have one handy, but there are images of those, maybe not edited video, but that there are images of them putting those down either, in either direction. So when they rolled back, when you get to the threshold, they would have put those plywood sheets down as the crawler transitions from the crawler way rock to the again to sort of protect the floor. So yeah, unfortunately I don't have, there's a lot of shuttle video that is just that's basically in storage at this point. So I mean I probably have some, I have all of that video in boxes, but it's hard to get access to that now. But yeah, I mean, it looks like, again, I haven't talked to those guys, but they have a view, from the crawler way. So so basically east of well east of the threshold. But you can see on their stream, you can see the vehicle in high bay 3 on the right, and then you can see high bay 1 on the left. So that's typically not a place that they can set up cameras. So they're there because of that at the moment. Um, yeah, it's just the transferring. The problem is the hard drive sizes don't expand quite as fast as other things. So yeah, and also just again not having I don't have quite the resources that other folks have. So and also just been busy. So it's like I just went from one type of busy writing, chasing stories around the country, to this has become relatively busy. especially in the last several months. So but yeah, so let's see. We're around 8:15 Eastern here. Somebody's saying the they're pushing some of the other live streams to 8:30 ish. So and so I'm going to sign off probably in about 10 minutes. So if anybody else has any other questions, let's see. I think so. Ravi's asking, would NASA invest in another uh, heavy lift launch or super heavy lift launch vehicle? I don't think they are investing in Starship and Blue Moon. It's just that they're a minority investor. What we're looking at here on my live stream, they are fully invested. They are the sole proprietor. They pay all the bills for this system. They own and operate the entire program. All of the programs that you see here. So all of the infrastructure around the rocket is Exploration Ground Systems, Kennedy Space Center. Orion up here is uh, based out of Johnson Space Center in Texas, and then of course SLS is based at Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville. NASA and therefore Congress and the U.S. government pays for all of this. So this is, again, this is the contractors basically have no skin in the game. Whereas again, for the newer, public private, again, specifically for Starship and Blue Moon, it's not the complete opposite, but it's much closer where SpaceX and Blue Origin are making much higher investments in research and development than the government. And the government is maybe like an anchor customer, but they're still a minority investor. And so that's a dynamic that's going to change. I think I would not expect to see a anything like we saw with Apollo and Saturn or Shuttle. I don't think we're going to see the government run another rocket program like this again. This is the last one that they'll do like this. They will basically, the argument for a long time has been that the private sector can do this more efficiently, and that the government doesn't have to pay for it, doesn't have to pay to manage the systems anymore. They just purchase the service, buy the ride on the transportation system. And so, yeah, I expect this to be the last system that not that they invest in, but that they wholly own and operate. So they may be a minority investor in future transportation systems, but I think the idea is that once they make this initial investment, that the SpaceX's and the Blue Origins don't need this level of investment on a permanent basis, that they'll go from investing in the research and development to some extent to just buying the service, and that's it. That's, I think, the idea. So NASA doesn't. I guess I'm not sure exactly how you would put it. I guess I would say if you look at the commercial crew flights, those are managed by the providers themselves. So I don't think they cooperate. It's a little different because they're flying to the space station, which is a NASA managed system. So that's a system that'll probably be one of the last things. And of course, they're looking at transitioning that and retiring that in maybe early in the next decade now, instead of at the end of this one. But that may be the last system that the government, maybe ISS, maybe Orion. We'll have to see how those transition exactly. But yeah, I think, again, those are going to be, and because of that, there's a handover there where when the crew goes into the space station, then that becomes a NASA operation. But up until that point, it's sort of a joint operation where SpaceX is managing Dragon with the crew as they fly up and dock to the space station, and then it's a joint operation once the spacecraft gets into that sphere of influence, keep out sphere, not sphere of influence, but yeah, the keep out sphere, and there's probably a larger control space around the space station. But again, it goes from just a free flyer to a joint operation, and then but that's managed by SpaceX. And so yeah, you can say that which people have made the point that NASA has too much on their plate with too little money to do it. But I mean, that is a pre-existing condition, I guess I would say. And so it's kind of like, it's the old cartoon of you knew the job was dangerous when you took it, Fred. So if you're managing a NASA program, you're going to have more to do than you have money to do for it. But that's kind of unfortunately become the nature of the game. I think this getting out of these types of systems, I think we will see what happens with the political support as this goes away. But I think the initial hope is that they can keep this money within the NASA budget for use elsewhere. I think that's I think the longer term, by the end of the next decade question, I think is going to be, what does NASA's budget look like after NASA gets out of human spaceflight? Because once they begin using commercial services completely, I'm not even really sure who's going to be managing like the lunar base. Who's going to be operating the lunar base? I don't know. I don't know if NASA would be the ones that would be operating that or not, because that will be very expensive in and of itself. So, again, you do have to, there is the question of how much money the government is willing to invest. And I'm sure that there will be discussions, and there will be private companies that will be willing to manage a lunar facility for NASA. I guess again, then there will be a negotiation there about how much money that would be. But I'm sure there will be interest in doing that if the prices are right. So. Okay. So somebody's saying that somebody says NASA's gone live. Let me go ahead and of course it's right as I'm ending my stream, but that's okay. So this is probably, I think, from the same vantage point. So this is from High Bay 4 looking across the transfer aisle to High Bay 3, and you could see I think you could see an elevator going through here over here. These are I think a couple of the elevator shafts. Those are high-speed elevators. I got a chance to ride on those a couple of times. It's pretty cool to look. They have glass. You can see into the integration cell when you're going up and down those. But let's see. So and since they've gone live, I'm going to do a couple of cleanup things here, or a couple of. I'll start. I am trying to do some archiving of stuff here. So, yeah, there's going to be, and then I think this is going to be, it'll be interesting to see, because I think this changed. If Artemis II had flown in early February, I think the focus would have completely shifted to the future. Now we're going to have a little bit more, I think we're going to have a little bit of an overlap, and it'll be interesting to see how this goes. And you can see the elevators there. You can see the elevators again. But there's, I think, going to be more conversation about the future during Artemis II, I think, than we would have had if they'd been separated. But now they're happening kind of together. So it is going to be interesting to see what it is going to be interesting to see how things go during the mission, in terms of what they're talking about and what they're willing to do kind of around the mission itself. But I think for me, I'm going to still try and concentrate on covering the mission, because it is obviously, it's the first step, and that they're going to need it. It needs to go. It needs to be a clean mission now if they're really still talking about mid 2027 for Artemis III. And so we'll have to see. So it's important, and it's just maybe reframed a little bit because the plans have changed, but this still would be the first time people have gone to the moon since the end of 1972. So it's just going to be interesting to see the dynamic after the mission concludes. Again, hopefully everybody is, it's safe and successful. And that's what I'm thinking is more, well, so what happens after that? And because there's a lot of things that have to happen in the next year. And that's not very much time. Not for this system here with Orion, SLS, and Exploration Ground Systems, but also with the lunar landers and also with the spacesuits. Yeah, it's probably, maybe this might be, I'm going to run out of time here, but it's probably a good way to sort of a good note perspective to end the stream on, which is NASA doesn't have a checkbook. NASA doesn't write the checks. Congress writes the checks. And so NASA doesn't have any money to appropriate. They get all of their money, and the money's, again, the checks are written by Congress, and Congress decides who to pay, who to give money to. So Congress only once was ever willing to have a blank checkbook and just write checks, and that was Apollo. But then again, that was in a different era, different era of commercial development. You have different industries in a different place, maturity wise. So I don't think NASA can help, certainly not financially. And I don't think Congress can help, certainly not help SpaceX. SpaceX is in a much better financial situation than Congress, whether you look at that just purely from a space or more broadly. So yeah, there isn't, I don't think the government can help SpaceX financially. SpaceX has more money that they can invest in research and development at this point faster than Congress anyway. And they're already doing that. So, and you can say the same thing about Blue Origin with their systems too, again, because they are funded by these almost trillionaires, I think, at this point. So, but so it's hard to tell if it looks okay. No, they are rolling, because I can see on the NSF live stream that the platform, the base of the mobile launcher has come out, has crossed the threshold. So anyway, at least we got to see first motion over here. And what I will plan to do is I'll be over on the NSF NASA Spaceflight live stream in about half an hour, depending on how quickly we can get Teddy settled with dinner and his evening constitutional. And then I'll plan on coming back tomorrow morning a little before sunrise on the East Coast, and hopefully we will see the vehicle either approaching the pad or already there on the pad surface, or maybe even hard down. And we can do more questions, and we'll have something to look at tomorrow morning. But again, thanks for watching my stream. Like the stream if you thought this was informative, and I will hopefully see many of you tomorrow morning, and if not, I'll in half an hour over on the NSF live stream. But again, thanks again for stopping by.